We spend most of our waking lives trying to outrun our own dissatisfaction. We chase the next promotion, a higher salary, or a more comfortable lifestyle, operating on the assumption that acquiring enough of these things will finally bring us peace. But capturing those goals rarely stops the itch. It usually just resets our baseline, leaving us anxious about protecting what we already have or immediately wanting whatever comes next. This cycle of chasing and never quite arriving is the default human condition. 2.5 millennia ago, a man ran the ultimate experiment to see if having literally everything could actually cure it. That person was Siddhartha Gautama. Born in the 6th century BC near the foothills of the Himalayas, his historical existence is anchored by physical evidence like this stone pillar in Lumbini, marking his exact birthplace. Siddhartha was a prince, and his father engineered his environment to be a flawless paradise. Heavy golden doors sealed him off from anything unpleasant. He had every luxury, every comfort, and zero exposure to pain. But the quarantine eventually broke. When the young prince finally ventured outside the palace walls, he collided with the inescapable trajectory of biology. For the first time, he saw an old man, a severely sick person, and a corpse. The realization hit him hard. All the wealth and political power in his kingdom offered zero protection against time and disease. Everything he loved was entirely impermanent. At age 29, he made a radical choice known as the Great Renunciation. He walked away from his royal inheritance, leaving his family and the palace behind, to search for a permanent way out of this cycle of suffering. He saw suffering as an underlying condition of life itself, an ailment that material success simply could not treat. Finding the cure would require an approach that addressed the core mechanics of human existence. For 6 years, he wandered the Ganges Valley, testing the exact opposite of his luxurious upbringing. He pushed his body to the absolute limits of survival, practicing extreme fasting and harsh self-mortification in the punishing heat. But starving himself didn't yield answers. He realized that a collapsed, malnourished physical state only degrades the mind's ability to think clearly. This led him to the concept of the middle way. It is the precise philosophical balance point between indulging every sensory desire and actively torturing oneself. By stepping away from those rigid extremes, he finally cultivated the mental clarity required for the final phase of his search. He sat down beneath a tree in Bodh Gaya, at the exact geographical site where this towering temple now stands, and vowed not to move until he understood the root of human sorrow. This diagram shows what he saw in deep meditation, an unbroken chain reaction called dependent origination. He observed how a fundamental ignorance of reality generates craving, which tightens into clinging, which directly produces our suffering. He codified this insight exactly like a physician diagnosing a disease. The first step is acknowledging the symptom, dukkha. This represents the persistent, unavoidable unsatisfactoriousness and impermanence found throughout life. The second step identifies the cause. That underlying pathogen is craving, our constant demand for things to be different than they currently are. The third step is the prognosis. Extinguishing that craving breaks the cycle and stops the suffering. This state of unconditioned peace is known as nibbana. This wheel visualizes his final step, the prescription. The Eightfold Path provides a daily, highly practical regimen of ethical conduct, mental discipline, and wisdom, designed to clear the mind and achieve that liberation. He didn't ask anyone to worship a new deity to achieve this. Instead, he mapped out a verifiable psychological mechanism that anyone can use to debug their own human operating system. After reaching this state of awakening, he was known as the Buddha. Rather than withdrawing to enjoy his personal peace, he spent the next 45 years walking the dusty banks of the Ganges out of profound compassion for others. In a society strictly segregated by caste, his approach was radically egalitarian. He offered the exact same teachings to wealthy kings, to powerful Brahmins, and impoverished outcasts without making the slightest distinction between them. To maintain and distribute this methodology, he established a dedicated monastic community known as the Sangha. The sheer scale of these sprawling brick ruins demonstrates how rapidly and systematically his early followers organized to preserve the practice. Through decades of teaching, he defined nibbana as an earthly state of being fully alive, operating with a mind cleared of greed, hatred, and delusion. The historical texts are highly explicit about one detail. The Buddha was entirely human. He was not a god, not a divine incarnation, and claimed no supernatural authority. Because of this, his final doctrine demands radical self-reliance. He could only point out the route. The actual friction of walking the path, step by step, requires intense personal effort. To walk it successfully, he taught that we have to develop two qualities in equal measure: the sharp analytical intellect of wisdom and the boundless emotional depth of compassion. The ultimate lesson of his life is that lasting peace is achieved by mastering the architecture of one's own mind, rather than by conquering external circumstances.